Throughout World War II, more than 130,000 Americans endured a prisoner of war experience. We honor them all today, but in particular, we want to highlight one brave soldier. Thomas Gagnier was a POW in the Pacific War, and after the war, a powerful witness for justice. Thomas Gagnier was born in 1919 in Fort Worth, Texas, and was drafted into the Army in May of 1941. He found himself posted to the 803rd Engineer Aviation Battalion at Clark Field in the Philippines. At the time, such a peacetime posting was considered nearly ideal service in the tropical paradise. Neither Tom nor anyone else could envision that by the end of 1941, they would be at war and fighting for their lives. Japan invaded the islands soon after Pearl Harbor. Gagnier was wounded in late January 42, and by February had moved to the island of Corregidor. American forces on Bataan surrendered in April of 42. Corregidor held out for another 27 days before the beleaguered forces there had to surrender. With that, Corporal Thomas Gagnier entered the unimaginable hell of the Japanese prisoner of war camps. His first camp was the notorious Cabanatuan, but in October of 42, Tom was shipped to a labor camp near Mukden, Manchuria. As Tom would later tell his story, one day on the ship in transit, he awoken in pitch blackness and stifling heat. Carefully, he felt his way to the deck for fresh air. On deck, he heard a friend's voice nearby. "Hey, have you ever seen such a black night?" Tom asked his buddy. "What do you mean, Tom? It's broad daylight," came the reply. Likely due to the months of malnutrition, Corporal Thomas Gagnier had gone blind. He recovered some of his sight, but his vision never fully returned. At Mukden, Tom was forced to work with complex machinery despite his limited eyesight. At first, he received some medical treatment from his captors, but even that stopped when a new medical officer, Joichi Kuwashima, took over the camp hospital. Kuwashima began to beat Tom mercilessly. For instance, in October of 1944, he accused the corporal of stealing. Gagnier was beaten, suffered the water torture, and was locked in an unheated cell without food or water for 2 days. At the end of the war, Tom and all surviving prisoners of the Japanese were liberated, and the full enormity of the POW system was exposed. There was no question that individual soldiers would be held accountable for the treatment of prisoners. In 1946, Captain Kuwashima and his commander were brought before an international court. Bravely, Corporal Thomas Gagnier, still considered legally blind by the Army, agreed to testify at the war crimes trial in Japan. "I'm going not because I want revenge," he told a newspaper, "but because I believe a just punishment of war criminals might help prevent another war." Largely due to Gagnier's testimony, Kuwashima was found guilty. Admirably, Tom Gagnier picked up the pieces of his life and achieved amazing things after the war. Although his eyesight never fully recovered, and he was considered legally blind, he became a teacher and later a school principal in Virginia. He married and raised 2 children. Tom also became a leader in post-war veterans organizations, including the Disabled American Veterans, Ex-American Prisoners of War, the American Legion, the VFW, American Defenders of Bataan, and the Blinded Veterans Association. Tirelessly determined that the American prisoner of war would never be forgotten, Gagnier spoke frequently about his experiences as he honored his fellow POWs. He lived until September of 2000 and is still remembered and admired by many. On this National POW MIA Recognition Day, we remember the quiet grace and dignity of this veteran who suffered so much, but who bravely made a stand for post-war justice and who dedicated his life to making the world better.
Color guard. Oh. Present. Arms.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight. O'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? Present arms. Order, arms!
Every left. Off.
Since World War II, more than 81,000 American service personnel have been classified as missing in action. For National POW MIA Recognition Day, we'd like to highlight one man who was missing in action for far too long, but who has since come home, fulfilling his wish. This is the story of U.S. Marine hero Francis Drake of Massachusetts. Francis Drake was born in Framingham, Massachusetts in 1922, but grew up in nearby Springfield. When war came to the U.S., Drake enlisted in the United States Marine Corps, eager to do his part. After basic training, he was assigned to Company C, 1st Battalion, 7th Marines, and his unit was sent to the unknown island of Guadalcanal, which was soon to be the focus of the U.S. war against Japan. PFC Drake understood the potential risk of his service. In a letter home to his mother, he expressed his hope that should he fall in battle, his body would be returned to lie beneath the soil of his home state. No one can know that his request would take nearly 8 decades to fulfill. On October 9, 1942, Drake's company was engaged in battle with the Japanese in the hills of Guadalcanal. Eyewitnesses recounted how Drake and another man exposed themselves to hostile fire to rescue a wounded Marine and carry him to safety. A man of small stature, less than 5.5 feet tall, Drake, nevertheless, hoisted his wounded comrade onto his back and carried him 100 yards toward cover. Sadly, before reaching safety, Drake and the wounded man were hit by enemy fire and killed. For his heroic and self-sacrificial actions that day, PFC Drake's family would receive a posthumous Silver Star and Purple Heart. Soon after, Drake was buried by his buddies atop a ridge nearby, but due to the chaotic and ever-changing front lines of Guadalcanal, his burial place was soon lost. After the war, military officials attempted to locate the lost graves of U.S. personnel in Guadalcanal, but Drake's remains were deemed unrecoverable. Now skip forward to 2011. A resident of Guadalcanal was digging a foundation for a house when he uncovered skeletal remains. He immediately contacted the authorities and made contact with American authorities. The Defense POW MIA accounting agency soon was on the job. Since 2015, DPAA has worked tirelessly to provide the fullest possible accounting of missing American service personnel, fulfilling our nation's obligation to the men and women in uniform. The amazing work of DPAA in identifying unknown American service personnel is impressive, but it does not go quickly. It was not until 2017 that the remains were identified as PFC Francis Drake. Another Marine buried adjacent to Drake was identified at the same time as PFC Harry Morrissey of New Hampshire, although whether Morrissey was the Marine Francis Drake was trying to save will likely never be known. The following Memorial Day, Francis Drake's request from 1942 was finally fulfilled as he was laid to rest with full military honors at the Massachusetts Memorial Veterans Cemetery. He was later awarded the Massachusetts Medal of Liberty by his native state. Drake is only one of many unidentified heroes brought home and given a name by DPAA. Their labor of love will continue for as long as there are Americans buried under stones that read, "None but to God." We honor their service, and we pledge to remember.